Black girl cries at his mother's grave and says, she's still alive, then billionaire dad dug it up. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves across Westlake Elementary's playground. Amara Carter sat alone on a bench, her small fingers tracing the edges of her science notebook. Unlike the other children racing around the playground, squealing with laughter as they waited for their parents, the 10-year-old preferred the quiet company of her thoughts. Her father's assistant was running late again. Amara checked her watch, a miniature version of the expensive timepiece Malcolm Carter wore to his board meetings. 20 minutes had passed since the final bell. She sighed and returned to her notebook, sketching a portrait of a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. The face had become fuzzy in her memory, but she tried to capture it anyway. "That's really good," a soft voice said. Amara looked up to find a woman standing beside her bench. She wore light blue scrubs and a surgical mask, with a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. Something about her seemed familiar, though Amara couldn't place it. Perhaps it was the gentle curve of her eyes or the way she tilted her head slightly when she spoke. "Thank you," Amara replied, closing her notebook. Her father had drilled into her the importance of being cautious around strangers, especially given their family's wealth and status. The woman knelt down to meet Amara's eye level. "You're Amara, aren't you? Amara Carter?" Amara nodded cautiously, glancing toward the school entrance where a teacher was busy directing traffic for pickup. The woman's presence didn't feel threatening. Rather, there was something comforting about her. "I have something for you," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded note, her hands trembling slightly. "Your mother asked me to give this to you." Amara's heart skipped a beat. "My mother?" The words caught in her throat. "But my mother is—" "Just read it when you're alone," the woman interrupted, pressing the note into Amara's small palm. "Please." Before Amara could respond, the woman stood up and walked away, moving with purpose toward the street. She disappeared around the corner just as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. "Miss Amara!" called Martin, her father's assistant, hurrying toward her. "I'm so sorry I'm late. There was unexpected traffic on the bridge." Amara barely heard him. Her attention was fixed on the folded paper in her hand. Ordinary lined paper, nothing special, but it felt like it weighed a ton. She carefully slipped it into her backpack as Martin collected her things. "How was school today?" Martin asked, opening the car door for her. "Fine," Amara replied automatically, her mind elsewhere. During the drive home to their mansion in the exclusive Hillcrest neighborhood, Amara stared out the window, the note burning a hole in her backpack. Her mother, Celeste Carter, had died in a hospital fire 7 years ago. Amara had only been 3 at the time, with just fragments of memories left, the smell of vanilla perfume, the sound of a lullaby, and the feeling of being completely safe and loved. Malcolm Carter had never recovered from the loss. He'd thrown himself into work, building his technology empire to even greater heights. He'd provided Amara with every luxury imaginable, but there remained an emptiness in their palatial home that no amount of wealth could fill. Once inside her bedroom, Amara locked the door and carefully removed the note from her backpack. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The message was simple, written in flowing script that somehow tugged at her deepest memories. "Still watching over you." Amara read it again and again, her eyes welling with tears. She ran her fingers over the handwriting, trying to remember if she'd ever seen her mother's script before. There was something so intimately familiar about the way the letters curved. That evening, when Malcolm returned from work, Amara stood waiting in his study, the note clutched tightly in her hand. "Daddy, something happened today," she said, her voice small but determined. Malcolm looked up from his computer, his expression softening at the sight of his daughter. "What is it, sweetheart?" Amara approached his desk, placing the note in front of him. "A woman gave this to me at school. She said it was from Mom." Malcolm's face changed in an instant, shock, then anger, then something unreadable flashed across his features. He picked up the note, his hands noticeably unsteady. "This is a cruel joke," he said, his voice tight. Some sick person's idea of a prank. But the handwriting, Amara began. Your mother is gone, Amara. Malcolm's voice cracked slightly. She died 7 years ago. Can I see her handwriting? Amara asked suddenly. Do we have anything she wrote? Malcolm stared at his daughter for a long moment before rising from his chair. He walked to a safe hidden behind a painting on the wall, entering a combination that Amara knew by heart, her birthday. From inside, he removed a small box and placed it on the desk. These are the few things I kept, he said quietly, opening the box to reveal a collection of cards and notes. Amara pulled out a birthday card addressed to Malcolm. The handwriting matched the note perfectly. It's the same, she whispered, her heart racing. Daddy, it's the same. Malcolm took the card, comparing it to the note. His face drained of color. Why would she write me if she's not alive? Amara asked, her voice rising with a mixture of confusion and hope that threatened to overwhelm her. Who was that woman? Why did she say Mom asked her to give me this? Malcolm Carter, a man who commanded boardrooms and made billion-dollar decisions without flinching, stared at the note with growing uncertainty. For the first time in years, the carefully constructed reality he'd built around his wife's death began to crack. I don't know, he finally admitted, his voice hollow. But I'm going to find out. The morning sky wore a cloak of gray clouds as Malcolm's car rolled through the ornate iron gates of Evergreen Memorial Gardens. Amara sat beside him in silence, the note clutched in her hand like a talisman. She hadn't let it out of her sight since yesterday. Malcolm hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he parked near the private Carter Mausoleum, a grand marble structure that stood testament to his wealth and the depths of his grief 7 years ago. He'd spared no expense when mourning became a public affair. We don't have to do this today, Malcolm said softly, turning to his daughter. Yes, we do, Amara replied with a determination that both surprised and unsettled him. There was something in her eyes, a spark he hadn't seen before, something that reminded him painfully of Celeste. They walked together along the stone path, past rows of headstones gleaming with morning dew. Malcolm carried a small bouquet of white lilies, Celeste's favorite. This ritual visit on the 15th of each month had become sacred to him, a way to maintain connection with the wife he'd lost so suddenly. As they approached the mausoleum, Amara slowed her steps. Malcolm unlocked the heavy door, and they entered the cool, silent chamber. Celeste's marble marker dominated the central wall. Celeste Marie Carter, beloved wife and mother, gone too soon. Talk to her, Malcolm encouraged gently, placing the lilies in the copper vase beneath her name. I'll give you a moment alone. As Malcolm stepped outside, Amara moved closer to the marble plaque. Her small fingers traced the engraved letters of her mother's name. Are you really in there? She whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the chamber. The note said you're still watching me. How can you watch me if you're here? Memories of the previous night flooded back. How she'd slept with the note under her pillow, how she dreamed of a woman singing her to sleep. The tune had felt so real, so familiar. I don't remember much about you, Amara continued, tears beginning to stream down her face. Daddy doesn't like to talk about you because it makes him sad. But I need to know. Her voice broke. I need to know if that was really your handwriting. I need to know if you're still out there somewhere. Outside, Malcolm leaned against the mausoleum wall, checking emails on his phone, a habit he couldn't break even during these solemn visits. A text from his head of security appeared. Background check on all school staff underway. We'll report findings by noon. A sudden wail from inside the mausoleum made Malcolm drop his phone. He rushed back inside to find Amara collapsed on her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. She's not in there, she cried, pointing at the marble plaque. She's not finished. She said she's still watching me. Malcolm knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. Amara, sweetheart. No! She pushed against his chest. That woman knew me. She gave me Mom's note. Why would she do that if Mom has passed? Someone is playing a cruel trick. Malcolm tried to reason, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Excuse me, sir? A voice from the doorway made them both turn. An elderly man in the uniform of a cemetery caretaker stood there, cap in hand. "I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't help overhearing. Is everything all right?" Malcolm rose, shielding Amara. "We're fine. Just having a difficult moment." The caretaker nodded sympathetically. "Understandable. Losing someone so young is never easy." He glanced at Celeste's marker. "I remember when they brought her here. Closed casket, wasn't it?" Something about the man's casual observation struck Malcolm like a physical blow. Yes, it had been closed casket. Hospital staff had advised against viewing the body due to injuries sustained in the fire. At the time, consumed by grief and shock, Malcolm hadn't questioned it. "Thank you for your concern," Malcolm said dismissively. "We'd like some privacy now." After the caretaker left, Malcolm found himself staring at the marble plaque with new eyes. The funeral had been arranged by the hospital administration, a courtesy to the grieving billionaire. Malcolm had been in no state to handle details. He'd simply signed papers when presented. As Amara continued to sob quietly, Malcolm's mind raced back to that terrible week. The hospital fire had started in the psychiatric wing where Celeste was being treated for severe postpartum depression. Officials had informed him that she was among the 5 casualties. There had been identification paperwork, condolences, but had he ever seen actual proof? Had he ever seen official medical records? No. Just a death certificate from a third-party facility, now that he thought about it. The hospital had transferred patients during renovations. "Daddy," Amara's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can you ask the doctors if they really saw her? After the fire?" The question chilled him. How could his daughter's mind go exactly where his had just wandered? "Why would you ask that?" he whispered. Amara wiped her tears, her expression strangely composed for a child. "Because they lied," she said simply. "The woman at school was wearing Mom's locket, the gold one with the little stars. You never told me about it, but I remembered it just now." Malcolm felt the world tilt beneath him. The locket had been a wedding gift to Celeste, custom-made and one of a kind. "She was wearing it when she gave me the note," Amara added, certainty hardening her voice. Outside, thunder rumbled across the graveyard as the first raindrops began to fall. The headquarters of Carter Innovations occupied the top 15 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown. Malcolm's corner office on the penthouse level offered panoramic views of the city he'd helped transform with his technology empire. But today, he noticed none of it. "Get me everything," Malcolm ordered, pacing behind his desk while his general counsel, James Warren, took careful notes. "Every document, every form, every scrap of paper related to Celeste's hospitalization and death. And I want it yesterday." "Malcolm," James said cautiously, "it's been 7 years. Some records might be. I don't care if you have to dig through archives in a basement somewhere." Malcolm cut him off. "Something isn't right, and I need answers." 3 days had passed since the cemetery visit. 3 days of Malcolm questioning his own memories, wondering if grief had blinded him to inconsistencies at the time. 3 days of watching Amara carry that note everywhere, hope blooming in her eyes that broke his heart. "What specifically are we looking for?" James asked. Malcolm stopped pacing. "The death certificate, for starters. Medical records. Proof." After James left, Malcolm sank into his chair and opened his desk drawer, removing a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond ring, Celeste's engagement ring, recovered from her personal effects after the fire. He'd been told her wedding band had been too damaged to salvage. The hospital had returned a few charred items in a sealed plastic bag, which he'd been too devastated to open for months. His phone buzzed with a text from his head of security. "School camera footage obtained. Analysis in progress." Malcolm closed his eyes, remembering Amara's certainty about the locket. He'd given it to Celeste on their wedding day, a custom piece with a constellation of tiny diamond stars arranged in the pattern of the night sky on the day they met. If the mystery woman had been wearing it... A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered with a folder. Sir, the team found this in the primary archive. It was misfiled under insurance claims rather than personal records. Malcolm took the folder with unsteady hands. Inside was a copy of Celeste's death certificate, a document he remembered signing in a fog of grief. The hospital director's signature was at the bottom, Dr. Philip Warner. He stared at it for a long moment before picking up his phone. "Get me everything you can find on Dr. Philip Warner, former director of Lakeside Psychiatric." Later that afternoon, James returned with a team of 3 attorneys, all carrying boxes of files. His expression was grim as he closed Malcolm's office door. "We have a problem," James said, placing a tablet on Malcolm's desk. "There's no official death certificate filed with the state for Celeste Carter." Malcolm stared at him. "What?" "The hospital provided you with what appears to be an internal document," James explained. "But we can find no record that it was ever properly filed with vital statistics. Furthermore," he pulled out a document. "Dr. Warner, who signed it, retired 3 days after Celeste's supposed death and essentially vanished. No current address, no social media presence, nothing." "That's not possible," Malcolm whispered. "There's more," another attorney added. "Lakeside Psychiatric underwent a complete rebranding and leadership change within weeks of the incident. They were acquired by Meridian Health Systems, which itself was dissolved in a private equity acquisition the following year." Malcolm's mind raced. Meridian had been one of his early investments, a promising healthcare startup he'd helped fund through his venture capital division. He'd divested before the acquisition, on the recommendation of his financial team. "There's a pattern here of institutions disappearing," James said quietly. "Records getting buried in reorganizations. Very convenient if someone wanted to hide something." A text notification appeared on Malcolm's phone. "Footage analysis complete. Woman identified as former Lakeside nurse. Coming up." Before Malcolm could respond, his office door burst open. Amara rushed in, followed by a flustered nanny apologizing for the interruption. "It's okay," Malcolm said, signaling for the nanny to wait outside. His team of lawyers exchanged glances and quietly excused themselves. "I drew a picture for you, Daddy," Amara said, placing a large sheet of paper on his desk. Malcolm's breath caught. It was a remarkably detailed drawing of the woman from the school, wearing surgical scrubs, a cap, and mask. But around her neck, rendered with careful precision, was a locket exactly as he remembered giving to Celeste. The star pattern was unmistakable. "How?" Malcolm asked, his voice barely audible. "How did you remember this so clearly?" Amara's dark eyes met his. "I see her in my dreams sometimes. She sings to me." Malcolm pulled his daughter into a tight embrace, his mind whirling with implications. James reappeared at the door, holding a tablet. On the screen was a freeze frame from the school's security footage, showing a woman walking away from the bench where Amara had been sitting. "We enhanced the image," James said quietly. "The facial recognition isn't conclusive because of the mask and cap, but—" He handed the tablet to Malcolm, who looked down to see a digitally enhanced close-up of the woman's neck. There, partially visible beneath her scrubs, was the unmistakable edge of a gold locket. "Find her," Malcolm said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Whatever it takes." The petition to exhume Celeste Carter's remains landed on Judge Harriet Moore's desk on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, the story had leaked to the press. By Thursday, it dominated headlines across the country. Billionaire CEO claims wife's death faked, demands grave opened. Malcolm had hoped to keep the legal proceedings quiet, but nothing stayed secret for long when a man of his profile was involved. News vans now crowded the streets outside his mansion, reporters shouting questions each time he entered or left. "Malcolm, this media circus isn't helping our case," James warned during their emergency meeting. "Judge Moore is notoriously protective of her courtroom's dignity." "I don't care about dignity," Malcolm replied, his voice low and dangerous. "I care about the truth." 7 years, James. 7 years I've been mourning a woman who might be alive somewhere. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed Malcolm as a grieving husband desperate for closure. Others painted him as an unstable billionaire using his power to disturb the deceased. Mental health experts were quoted speculating about delayed grief responses and shared psychosis between father and daughter. Amara, meanwhile, had been kept home from school, away from the cameras and whispers. She spent hours in her room, drawing more pictures of her mother, some from memory, others seemingly from dreams. Malcolm found it unsettling how clearly she could render Celeste's features, despite having been only 3 when she died. On Friday morning, Malcolm's phone rang. It was James. "We have a hearing. Monday at 9 a.m. Judge Moore wants to see all parties." The courthouse steps were packed with journalists when Malcolm arrived Monday morning. He ignored their shouted questions, focusing instead on projecting confidence. Inside, the courtroom was equally crowded, morbid curiosity drawing spectators from all walks of life. Judge Moore, a stern woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, called the court to order. "Mr. Carter, this is an unusual request," she began. "Exhumation is not ordered lightly." "I understand, Your Honor," Malcolm replied. "But new evidence suggests the person buried in my wife's grave may not be my wife." "Evidence beyond a note and a locket?" the judge asked skeptically. James stepped forward. "Your Honor, we've submitted findings revealing significant irregularities in Mrs. Carter's death records. No state-filed death certificate exists. The hospital underwent suspicious reorganization immediately following her supposed death. And the physician who signed the only existing documentation disappeared days later." The county prosecutor rose to object. "Your Honor, disturbing a grave based on conspiracy theories." "These aren't theories," Malcolm interrupted. "My legal team has uncovered a pattern of deliberate document destruction. Someone wanted the world to believe Celeste Carter died in that fire. I need to know why." After 3 hours of arguments, Judge Moore made her decision. "I find sufficient cause to grant the petition for exhumation. The procedure will take place tomorrow at dawn, with minimal personnel present." The exhumation began at 5:30 a.m. under police supervision. Malcolm stood beside the cemetery director as workers carefully removed the marble plate from the Carter mausoleum wall. Behind it was a sealed concrete vault, which they opened to reveal a polished mahogany casket. Malcolm's heart pounded as they lifted the casket and placed it on a waiting platform. He'd been told that after 7 years, there would be significant decomposition. The forensic pathologist warned him about the potential psychological impact of viewing the remains. But Malcolm needed to see for himself. At the medical examiner's facility, the casket was opened in a controlled environment. Malcolm watched through a glass window as the examiner and her team documented everything. When the lid was finally raised, Malcolm steeled himself, only to feel confusion wash over him. The remains were there as expected, but something seemed wrong even to his untrained eye. The pathologist spent hours examining the body, occasionally conferring with colleagues. Finally, she approached Malcolm in the waiting area. "Mr. Carter, we've identified several inconsistencies," she said carefully. "The dental records don't match those provided for your wife. There's also a surgical scar that doesn't appear in any of Mrs. Carter's medical history." "What are you saying?" Malcolm asked, though he already knew. "We've taken DNA samples for confirmation, but preliminary findings strongly suggest these are not your wife's remains." The DNA results came back 3 days later, confirming what the physical examination had suggested. The woman buried in Celeste Carter's grave was not Celeste Carter. The revelation exploded across media channels worldwide. Malcolm's security team had to establish a perimeter around his estate as journalists, and curious onlookers tried to catch a glimpse of the billionaire whose life had become a real-life thriller. In his study, Malcolm sat surrounded by enlarged photographs from the exhumation and autopsy. The woman in the casket appeared to be approximately Celeste's age and build, similar enough that no one would question it if they weren't looking closely. "Who is she?" Malcolm asked the empty room. "And who would go to such lengths to make me believe my wife was deceased?" His phone chimed with a secure message from his head of security. Facial recognition found another match. "Hospital camera, north entrance, day of fire." Woman in nurse uniform appearing to escort patient. 79% match to school footage. Attached was a grainy image of a woman leading a patient toward an exit. Though the patient's face wasn't visible, something about her posture, the curve of her neck, sent chills down Malcolm's spine. He knew, with absolute certainty, he was looking at Celeste. I want every employee who worked at Lakeside Psychiatric during my wife's stay identified and interviewed. Malcolm instructed his expanding investigation team. The conference room in his home had been transformed into a command center, walls covered with timelines, photographs, and connection maps. 3 weeks had passed since the exhumation. The DNA tests had confirmed what the physical examination suggested. The remains belonged to an unknown woman roughly Celeste's age and build. The discovery had triggered a police investigation, but Malcolm's private team was moving faster, unconstrained by bureaucracy and fueled by unlimited resources. This is Jennifer Reeves, said Diane Powell, the former FBI agent Malcolm had hired to lead the investigation. She placed a photograph on the table, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and tired eyes. She was a night shift nurse at Lakeside when Celeste was admitted. She left the hospital 2 months after the fire and moved across the country. Is she our mystery woman from the school? Malcolm asked. No, Diane replied. But she might be our best lead to finding her. She tapped her tablet, bringing up flight records. Ms. Reeves has agreed to meet with us. She's landing in an hour. Malcolm's private jet was readied within 20 minutes. Before leaving, he stopped by Amara's room, where she sat drawing at her desk. I have to go out for a while, he told her gently. This nurse might know something about your mother. Amara looked up, her eyes bright with hope that both buoyed and terrified Malcolm. Will you call me if you find her? The moment I know anything, he promised. On the flight, Malcolm reviewed what they'd learned so far. The hospital fire that supposedly claimed Celeste's life had been ruled an accident, faulty wiring in the psychiatric ward. 5 people had officially died, though now Malcolm questioned if any of those deaths were real. The facility had been part of Meridian Health Systems, a company Malcolm's venture fund had invested in years earlier. There's something else you should see, Diane said, interrupting his thoughts. She handed him a folder. This was buried in financial records from Meridian. A special program called Identity Shield for high-profile patients. Malcolm scanned the document. Patient Privacy Initiative with Enhanced Security Protocols, he read aloud. This looks like standard confidentiality measures. Keep reading, Diane urged. A few paragraphs down, Malcolm froze. Protective relocation services for at-risk individuals, complete identity reconstruction, ongoing monitoring. It reads like a witness protection program, Diane said. But run by a private corporation, outside oversight. Why would Celeste need this? Malcolm whispered. That's what we're going to ask Ms. Reeves. Jennifer Reeves was waiting in a small coffee shop in a nondescript strip mall when Malcolm and Diane arrived. She looked nervous, eyes darting toward the door each time it opened. Mr. Carter, she acknowledged as they sat down. I've been watching the news. Thank you for meeting us, Malcolm said, struggling to remain calm. You worked at Lakeside when my wife was a patient there. Jennifer nodded slowly. I was on the night shift in the secure wing. Mrs. Carter was different from our usual patients. The staff was told she had severe postpartum psychosis, but she never displayed typical symptoms. What do you mean? She was lucid, coherent. Sad, yes, but not delusional. Jennifer's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. She kept asking to call you, but her doctor, Dr. Warner, said all communication had to go through him. Malcolm felt sick. And the fire? Jennifer's voice dropped to a whisper. There was no fire. At least, not the way they reported it. There was a small, contained blaze in an empty records room. The alarms went off, and in the confusion, certain patients were moved. Moved where? A facility called Hawthorne Center. It was this place they sent people who needed to disappear. Rich people's inconvenient relatives, witnesses to corporate misdeeds, people who knew too much. Malcolm struggled to process what he was hearing. Are you saying my wife was kidnapped? That someone deliberately faked her death and held her against her will? Jennifer looked at him with pity. Mr. Carter, 3 days before the fire, your wife was officially admitted under a new name, Celeste M. Carter. Look at the initials. Malcolm's blood ran cold. CMC. The note to your daughter. Diane realized. Signed M4 Marie. Jennifer reached into her purse and removed an envelope. After I saw the news about the exhumation, I found this. I kept it all these years, not knowing what to do with it. Malcolm opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was an employee roster from Hawthorne Center, dated 6 months after Celeste's death. Halfway down the list, a name jumped out, Celeste M. Carter, Patient Care Specialist. She worked there? Malcolm asked, bewildered. It's how they hide people in plain sight. Jennifer explained. Give them jobs within the facility. They're monitored but allowed limited freedom. Eventually, some earn enough trust to venture outside for specific tasks. Like delivering a note. Diane murmured. Why? Malcolm demanded. Why would anyone do this to her? To us? Jennifer hesitated. Before the transfer, I overheard Dr. Warner on the phone. He said something about the Carter woman knows about Lagos. Does that mean anything to you? Malcolm's face strained of color. Project Lagos had been an early experimental drug trial his company had funded in West Africa. It had been shut down after concerns about testing protocols, the records sealed in confidential settlements. She found something, Malcolm whispered. And someone decided she was a liability. There's one more thing, Jennifer said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. Hawthorne was shut down 3 years ago. Patients were transferred to various facilities. This is where I believe they sent the remaining long-term residents. Malcolm stared at the name on the paper, Oak Ridge Care Home. A rural facility 4 hours from the city. She might still be there, Jennifer said softly. She might still be alive. Dawn broke over the rolling hills surrounding Oak Ridge Care Home, coloring the modest brick building in soft, golden light. From the car, Malcolm studied the facility, a far cry from the luxury his wealth could afford. The place looked decent but unremarkable, designed to attract minimal attention, perfect for hiding someone in plain sight. Security is minimal, Diane reported, lowering her binoculars. 2 guards at the entrance, basic keycard access. But we can't just storm in. I'm not storming anywhere, Malcolm replied, his voice steadier than it had been in weeks. I'm a concerned citizen looking to make a charitable donation. The administrator's office smelled of artificial lavender and cleaning products. Ms. Winters, a harried-looking woman in her 60s, seemed simultaneously suspicious and thrilled by the unexpected visit from a billionaire philanthropist. We're always grateful for community support, Mr. Carter, she said, eyeing the check amount he'd written with poorly concealed excitement. Our residents have complex needs that funding simply doesn't cover. I believe in supporting quality care, Malcolm responded smoothly. Would it be possible to tour your facility? I like to see firsthand where my contributions are going. As Ms. Winters led him through the corridors, Malcolm scanned every face they passed. Diane had created a digital aging progression of Celeste, showing how 7 years might have changed her appearance. He carried the image in his mind like a map to buried treasure. This is our recreational therapy room, Ms. Winters was saying, gesturing toward a sunny space where several residents painted at easels or worked with clay. And there she was, seated by the window, a woman with dark hair streaked with premature silver focused intently on a canvas before her. Though thinner than he remembered, with new lines around her eyes, Malcolm would have known her anywhere. The curve of her neck, the way she held her brush, some things couldn't be disguised. Who is that? He asked, his voice barely audible. Ms. Winters followed his gaze. That's Marie. She's been with us about 3 years. Remarkable artistic talent, but struggles with dissociative episodes. Marie. M. Celeste Marie Carter. May I speak with her? Malcolm asked. Ms. Winters hesitated. She doesn't do well with strangers, Just for a moment, Malcolm pressed. Her work is extraordinary. Reluctantly, Ms. Winters led him toward the window. Marie? This gentleman would like to see your painting. She turned, and Malcolm's world stopped. Those eyes, Amara's eyes, looked up at him with polite confusion. Hello? She said softly. Malcolm struggled to find his voice. Your technique is beautiful. Thank you, she replied, studying him with growing intensity. Something flickered across her face, recognition fighting through layers of medication and manipulation. Do I? She began hesitantly. Do I know you? Before Malcolm could answer, alarms blared throughout the building. Diane's distraction had worked perfectly, a small fire deliberately set in a trash can in the east wing. As staff rushed to respond, Malcolm knelt beside Celeste's chair. Celeste, he whispered. It's Malcolm. I've come to take you home. Her eyes widened, tears forming instantly. Malcolm? But they told me, they said you didn't want. They lied, he said fiercely. They'd been lying for 7 years. Amara and I never stopped needing you. Amara, she breathed, the name unlocking something deep within her. My baby. I saw her. I gave her a note. I know. That's how we found you. Security guards appeared at the doorway, alerted by Ms. Winters. Diane intercepted them, flashing FBI credentials, borrowed from a friend, but effective enough to buy precious minutes. We need to go now. Malcolm urged gently. Can you walk? Celeste nodded, rising shakily from her chair. As Malcolm helped her toward the exit, she clutched his arm. Project Lagos, she whispered urgently. The trials. Children died, Malcolm. I found the reports. They said if I told anyone, they'd take Amara. I know, Malcolm assured her, though the full horror of her words was still sinking in. You're safe now. We both are. 2 days later, after medical evaluations confirmed Celeste's identity through DNA testing, Malcolm brought Amara to the private hospital where Celeste was recovering. He prepared his daughter as best he could, explaining that her mother had been kept away against her will, that she might seem different after so many years. None of that mattered the moment Amara saw Celeste. The girl broke free from Malcolm's grip and ran across the room, throwing herself into her mother's waiting arms. I knew you weren't deceased, Amara sobbed, clinging to Celeste. I knew it. I never stopped watching over you, Celeste whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. Every single day. In the months that followed, the full scope of the conspiracy unraveled. Board members from Malcolm's early ventures had covered up catastrophic failures in the Lagos drug trials. When Celeste discovered evidence while volunteering at the hospital's charitable foundation, they orchestrated her disappearance, using Malcolm's own investment connections against him. The press called it the corporate scandal of the decade. Arrests were made, companies collapsed, and class action lawsuits mounted. Malcolm resigned from all his board positions, focusing instead on creating a medical ethics foundation in Celeste's name. Healing came slowly. Celeste suffered from trauma that medication couldn't fully address. Malcolm battled guilt over not questioning her death more thoroughly. Only Amara seemed to adapt seamlessly, as though she'd always known her mother would return. On a crisp autumn afternoon, 1 year after the reunion, the Carter family stood together at Evergreen Memorial Gardens. Workers removed the marble plaque bearing Celeste's name, replacing it with a simple marker honoring the unnamed woman who had been buried in her place, likely another victim silenced by the same conspiracy. I wonder who she was, Celeste said softly, placing flowers beneath the new marker. Whoever she was, Malcolm replied. Her death helped bring you back to us. For that, we'll always honor her memory. Amara slipped her small hand into her mother's. Can we go home now? I want to show you my new drawings. As they walked away, Celeste wearing the locket that had helped reunite them, Malcolm marveled at life's unpredictable path. 7 years of mourning had ended with a miracle. A child's unwavering belief had unraveled a conspiracy. And the truth, no matter how deeply buried, had finally come to light.